Hello, everybody. How's it going? I'm here to talk to you guys about Japanese live ops and events. But before we do that, you probably need to know a little bit about me and why this guy from King's talking to us about Japanese live ops and events. Give you a little bit of context. My name is Fawzi. I'm a game designer. I've been a game designer for the past 16 years. I'm currently the game design director at King in the Berlin office. I'm leading a team of over 14 game designers in the studio right now, looking after the Candy Crush franchise. I'm originally from Jordan. I started my career there working for a whole bunch of companies, local companies, some of them indies, where I first started put together a game with a bunch of friends, and we started making games. We worked on games for like PC and Xbox 360. We worked on games on Facebook, on mobile, and eventually I started working for a company called Atlas, which I assisted on their Persona franchise. I worked on Persona 3 Social and Persona 3 Portable cross-location. From Jordan, I went on a small detour all the way to New Zealand, and I worked for the Gameloft studio over there. This is myself with the My Little Pony team and the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Mr. John Key at the time. We worked on My Little Pony, which was one of the biggest successes for the company at the time. I also worked on Ice Age Adventures. This is me with a bunch of penguins. And I also worked on My Little Pet Shop, Pastry Paradise, Amazing Spider-Man 2, and as well worked with the team in Madrid to release, and Barcelona to release Minion Rush, which is one of our biggest successes at Gameloft at the time. From Gameloft, I took another detour over to Japan, where I was working for a company called Inish. Inish is a subsidiary that works with a bunch of Japanese companies like Square Enix, Agree, etc., and we collaborate with Glue Mobile as well. There I worked in Tokyo, and I was the only guy that's not Japanese on my team. I learned as much from those guys as they learned from me. We worked on a whole bunch of games during my 2 years in Japan. You guys probably never heard of any of them, but I'm going to say them anyway because they're Japan-only releases. It's Seinen no Kyushin, 12 Odins, Yorokami, and Cluton. From Japan, I took another detour all the way over here to Germany, where I'm now at the King Berlin office. King is probably most known for Candy Crush franchise, and this is a picture of Angela Merkel trying to create a Candy Crush level. I've also written the first ever book on game design in Arabic, released that last September. I'm very happy to be able to share Game Design 101 with people who are not privileged to have to learn a foreign language in order for them to learn more about game design. Tell you a little bit about my company. So we are part of Activision Blizzard. Activision Blizzard is the largest gaming company in the Western world, with Activision being having the number one gaming franchise in the US, Blizzard being the number one PC RPG of all time, King being the number one mobile gaming publisher in the US, and MLG is the televised video gaming league in the US as well. So this is what our company kind of looks like. And there's a lot of franchises that you guys probably all familiar with, but I'm going to zoom in a little bit about King, tell you a little bit about our company before we dive into some Japanese live ops, right? So King started all in 2003 when we were focusing on online skill games. Originally, the games were available through our site and Yahoo, before we moved over to social games in 2011, and by 2012 we moved to mobile, launched Candy Crush and a bunch of other games, and the rest is history. We've made over 200 games from that time period. We have over 285 million active users monthly, and as of Q1 2018, and we have offices in Stockholm, Seattle, Barcelona, London, Madrid, Malmö, San Francisco, and Tokyo. And we're over 2,000 employees. We've been acquired by Activision Blizzard in February 2016. These are some of our games. Our most known games are the Candy Crush franchise, with all 4 games, Candy Crush Friends being the latest, launched last year, as well as our Farm Hero franchise, Pet Rescue franchise, and Bubble Witch event. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a design talk to you guys about some of the things that I thought were pretty interesting during my time working as a design director in my office in Japan, working with over 7 teams as they launched games for the Japanese market almost exclusively, as well as us helping Western developers publish their games in the Japanese market. So we'll start off with a little bit of an explanation of what a live event is. You probably heard a whole bunch of definitions, a whole bunch of names about live ops. Some people call them events, some people call them live ops, some people call them seasonal, some people call them seasons. It's pretty much a time-based event or a campaign that applies the same game mechanics that the game usually uses, but for a different purpose. And it also adds sometimes brand new mechanics that will give players exceptional rewards. Events in Japanese games usually are allocated a name and a theme, and they're usually announced way ahead of time, so it's something that you'd be waiting for and anticipating. And while a lot of events are tied to seasonal events or like real-life events such as Christmas or Sakura season in Japan or whatnot, they don't always have to be that. We try to release live ops that come with the seasonal events, but it's not necessarily that as well. Come back to the announcements. So, like even the events, some of them run for the duration of 2 weeks. Those are like the most common event duration. Some companies operate on monthly, and some companies operate on daily event schedules. Some particular popular games, such as Puzzle and Dragons, for example, they operate on all three at the same time, with bi-weekly, monthly, and daily. Events durations are always very clearly marked when the event is presented with the title, what that event could potentially occur, and the dates and the time, so that it's the same for all users when it first starts. Presentations themselves, they have prominent displays in the game world, so when an event is going on, you would know it usually takes quite a big chunk of the UI when it happens, so that the users are aware of this is going on. And if it's not a UI-based event system, it will be like a significant portion of the game world that looks quite different, so that it will take the player's attention as they're playing. And once you tap on it, it will take you immediately to where the event is taking place, the dungeon or the location or the tasks that you need to do. Events are usually presents two types of goals to the player. There's personal goals, which is basically provide the player with an objective that they need to compete on their own using the game mechanics. So let's say in a game in which you need to defeat monsters, the game will present an objective for the player to defeat a certain number of a type of enemy monster to collect a certain type of reward within a given duration of time, for example. So it uses the same game mechanics and provides objectives to the player as they start playing. Sometimes they will have global goals. The global goals are basically, and those are the bigger events that happen, they will require a whole bunch of users to work together to defeat a common enemy or to achieve a common goal. So it will be an objective that the player cannot do on their own, that they need to basically to collaborate with everybody that's playing the game at the same time to be able to achieve that. The interesting part that I noticed in our event design is that it's a bigger picture. So like it's not just one event being taken solely. We design the events to work within a cycle. Most event cycles follow this particular method. The first event allows you to acquire the special item that you want, or a special weapon, special character, something like that. The second event enables you to grow that item or character, meaning that you'll be able to make them more powerful or more effective. That's your reward for completing that event on time. The third part of this, or event that closes the loop usually will allow you to use that item in an effective way. With games that offer PvP, that will provide you with a really good opportunity to use that item and show it off to other players. In PvE, it will give you like quite a significant reward when using it. So most events, they follow this cycle. That cycle can go rapidly, so within 3 months, the cycle could close. Some games will close a cycle within a year. A big part of the Japanese live op, as they set global standards in community service and community engagement. The live op team and structure within a Japanese company aims to directly have a close tie-in between the development team or the team that's running the live op and the players who are very actively involved in the game. And I'll show you guys some ways in which live ops usually achieve that. First of all, it's very popular to see tie-ins when you're creating live ops. So they found huge success in collaborating with either using multiple IPs from the same company, like in the first example with the Record Keeper and Final Fantasy Tactics crossover. But sometimes they collaborate with IPs that you would not think that is suitable and to great success. So like in the bottom part, this is Puzzle and Dragons tie-in with Batman. And the picture above it is a famous arcade drumming game called Taiko no Tatsujin, and that's also part in the Puzzle of Dragon tie-in. It's a huge part of the Japanese game ecosystem to have collaboration between multiple companies and use both IPs to leverage a lot of strength in running events like that. And I think there was once a Puzzle and Dragon and Clash of Clans collaboration, so you can still find some Clash of Clans characters in Puzzle and Dragons sometimes. A huge part of like almost every Japanese game launches with this feature. It's called the notice board. The notice board is basically an embedded web view within the game. It enables the live operations team to be able to update the news section of the app regularly without having to do resubmits, all done server side. And this is crucial for announcing the details of what the event entails. So like while the live op cycles are often quick, teams will not be able to incorporate tutorials that will explain every single minute detail of how the live op is taking place. The notice board is where the users can go in and find all the details that they need. Here's where they also announce upcoming live events or what these rewards are going to entail and furthermore. The second thing, and I found that's really fascinating, in almost every Japanese mobile company, there is one member of the team that is a dedicated social media specialist. And I know all companies have social media teams, but are usually in complete isolation with the team. I'm talking about a person that attends the morning scrum with the rest of the team, is operating the Twitter accounts, the Instagram accounts, and the Facebook accounts. And the reason is because that person is in direct communication with the users quite frequently, and they read every single comment, and they try to respond to every single comment sometimes, which can be a bit maddening. And they're usually advocating for like every single complaint, and they will put the team's notice to like if there's an issue that the users are complaining about. But most importantly, as well, as we have an event cycle that is constantly going for multiple durations, the users would go to Twitter to find the information about the events, the duration, server outages, and whatnot. The social media person on that team will provide a lot of value. Japanese, just a fun fact to add about this, Twitter is one of the most popular social media applications in Japan, and that's mostly because when it used to be 140 characters, you can actually write a lot in 140 Japanese characters. It might not be the same here in Germany, but with one character sometimes being a word, 140 characters can be quite a bit to explain a lot of information. Another feature that is almost crucial to almost every Japanese games that work with live ops is the gift box, or the inbox, if you may. This is the method of delivering the rewards once the live op is achieved, once the cycle is finished, or if we didn't do something correctly, we want to send some rewards to the player or a compensation reward. The inbox is where we send all of this stuff. So the inbox or the gift box is also one way for the team to directly communicate with the audience by giving them items directly, or for them to collect or reap the benefits of their engagement with the game through the box itself. And speaking of rewards, and this is very crucial, and I find like, especially when Western game development companies adopting the Japanese method, is that in Japanese games, the rewards that you get through the events, you will only find in the events. So once the event expires, whether it's a day or 2 weeks or whatnot, you will never see this item again. Which is, when speaking to Western developers about this, they think it's crazy because you're creating these assets and then you throw them away in the duration of 2 weeks. But the time-limited part of those events is what makes them so endearing. So because the item is only available for 2 weeks, the users are very likely to engage, and they're more likely to participate in the event than they would elsewhere, knowing that if they missed out on this, they're probably never going to get it again. And it's crucial to know that through this method, it is the best way to deliver content to the users usually. The other point I think it's worth mentioning as well, especially for the for people who work at dev teams around there, in order not to really screw up the game's economy and at the same time being able to be completely creative when it comes to events, most Japanese games apply what they call EP, which is event points. Event points is a currency that only works with events. So it's completely outside of the game's regular currency loop or economy loop. And the EPs are usually the currency that you would use while you're interacting with the event. It's rewards that you will get for completing event, and it's rewards that you can stack that you can use for other events later. This way they can inflate sometimes the economy within events without damaging the economy of your game itself. I'll tell you a little bit about the structure of the live operations team. Like I said, there are some small differences, but they're worth noting. A structure of a live operations team in a Japanese company would look something like this. The product director is basically 3 jobs that we have in the West combined. It's basically the producer, the lead designer, and the data scientist or the business performance manager all mushed into one person. Those guys live in the company usually. They like go home once every couple of days. They work a lot, but they're also like they basically steer the product direction and vision. The benefit, obviously, having one person doing all this job will cause a lot of work in that person's plate. The benefit of that is very fast decision making in terms of steering the product's direction. Since that person has the data and the know-how and the design knowledge to basically steer the ship when it comes to working with the team, they'll be able to make decisions quite autonomously and quickly. The live operations manager is an interesting role that I don't think it exists on its own in a Western game company as of yet. The live operations manager's job is basically to schedule the events. They basically make sure that the release of the events and the gachas are up to speed, are simultaneous, and are running on time. They also take care of promotions for the shop or for the currency shop and whatnot. But they make sure that all of these things are working in order. And I will show you an example of what the schedule of live ops would look like in some of those games in a bit. Game designers are pretty much the same kind of role as what you expect, design the mechanics and the balancing and whatnot. Narrative designers, they also call them text designers, usually do the double job of like writing all the narrative of the story of the game, making sure they look at all the text that's happening in the game, but they're also sometimes running the Twitter account and the social media channels. So in some way, that person would also kind of be a little bit overworked sometimes. They get the positive outcome of the Twitter or the social media channel having the same voice as the game. And as the users interact with that social media channel, they get pretty similar results. As for the programming and the art point of view, it is fairly similar to how it is in the West, with the exception, I think, within the art division, most Japanese companies are more likely to outsource than Western companies. Very few companies have the entire art team on staff. They'd usually have an art director and 2 or 3 members to manage the outsourcing connections. And they try as much as possible, especially with Japanese companies, to outsource within the Japanese ecosystem, mostly for language purposes. This is what an event schedule look like. This is some companies kind of publish their own event schedule within this game. So this is something you can actually find in the game to know where the event starts or stops. They're color coded according to duration, the type of the event, and the kind of item or interaction you might get. And as we were scheduling events for our games in general, we would have like large Excel sheets that are very similar to this. The live operations manager will be in charge of like knowing what event starts when, when does the live event end on one day, when does it start on 1 month, etc. And then they'll be able to tell you at a glance if you can run a promotion on that day or not, or if it's okay for you to release a large feature or not. So the live operation managers basically keeps you honest in terms of your release schedule, which also takes a little bit off of the product director who's already overwhelmed with so much stuff to think about. The biggest difference I find in terms of like content distribution is that in Western mobile gaming companies generally, we want to, whatever content that we make, whether it's levels, items, or characters, we want to make them available to the users as early as possible. Therefore, most of the content is usually distributed through the shop, the in-game shop or the in-game content itself. In Japanese games, content is never released that way. Content is always released within a time-limited fashion. So the gacha would be time-limited, so the item that you would get within a gacha within a month expires, and then you'll never see them again. And the content that you will get within the events is also time-limited. And that is think of it as the vehicle in which the developers deliver the content to the users. So in fact, as we're approaching the development cycle in Japanese development teams, we would finish the core gameplay as fast as possible to start immediately implementing the event structure, as it is the vehicle in which content is being delivered. And I think it's something I love to have noticed is that because the Japanese live op production and running games has been really focused on the customer, it kind of stems from the Japanese culture of having exceptional customer service and being completely customer obsessed, in which a lot of what we see right now in games as a service around the industry is taken a cue from the lessons that we've had in Asia a while ago, in terms of like direct community engagement, the importance of time events and engagement with the users, as well as like having an integral part of the direct communication between the team itself and the core engaged audiences. With that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you.